Barack Obama arrived in London on a crisp morning, the kind where the sky looked washed clean by the cold. His plane touched down softly, and as he stepped onto the runway, a fresh breeze swept across the tarmac, carrying the faint scent of rain that had fallen earlier. He took a slow breath, letting the air settle inside him. London always had a certain calmness, even on its busiest days, and he felt it the moment he landed. The visit had been planned for months. Meetings, speeches, formal dinners, press interviews, everything was organized down to the minute. But the event he looked forward to most was the ceremony at Buckingham Palace. He had been there years before, yet the feeling never changed. The palace had a timelessness about it, like stepping into a place where the past still whispered from the walls. As the convoy approached the palace gates, Barack looked out the window at the long line of tourists gathered along the sidewalks. Some waved. Some lifted their phones, hoping to capture a moment. Barack always tried to wave back, even if only for a second. He believed a simple wave could brighten someone's day, and perhaps years later they might remember it and smile. When the convoy finally rolled through the gates, the courtyard opened wide, grand, and perfectly arranged. The royal guards stood in their classic red uniforms, tall black hats rising like pillars. Their stance was straight, almost unbending, and they seemed carved from stone. Barack always admired their discipline. He knew what it felt like to hold still when everything inside you wanted to move. As he stepped out of the car, flashes from cameras lit the air for a moment. He smiled, shook hands with officials, exchanged polite words, and followed the escort toward the palace entrance. The ceremony was about to begin. The guards stood in two long lines, creating a narrow path. Barack walked slowly between them, taking in the small details most people overlooked. The shine of their buttons, the way their hands stayed perfectly still at their sides, the faint sound of their shoes against the ground as they shifted weight in tiny, barely visible movements. Even the way their eyes fixed straight ahead, focused, calm, unreadable. But on this day, something felt slightly different. Barack noticed one guard near the far end of the path. Not because he moved, he didn't. Not because he made a sound, he didn't. It was his eyes. They were not cold or distant like the others. They held a softness, almost a warmth, as though he recognized Barack not as a public figure, but as a human being standing before him. At first, Barack thought he imagined it. He continued walking, giving a small nod to the line of guards. But with each step he took closer, he felt it again, a quiet attention, gentle yet full of meaning. When he finally reached the guard, Barack slowed for just a second. The guard did not move, but his eyes followed subtly, carefully, respectfully. And in those brief moments, Barack sensed something, possibly admiration, possibly gratitude, or perhaps something deeper, something personal. He couldn't tell exactly, but the emotion behind the gaze was unmistakable. It wasn't unusual for people to look at him with respect or interest. He had met thousands of people in every part of the world, and each person carried their own feelings, their own stories. But this felt different. It was quiet, but strong, like a message trying to reach him without words. Inside the palace, the ceremony took place as expected. The halls, filled with golden frames and historic portraits, echoed with formal greetings and ceremonial language. Barack stood among diplomats, ministers, and royal officials, offering smiles and handshakes with practiced ease. He listened, spoke, and moved through the event with the calm presence that had become second nature to him. But every now and then, his mind returned to that moment with the guard. Something about it stayed with him, tapping gently at his thoughts like a soft knock on a door. When the ceremony's first portion ended, an aide stepped toward him. The aide spoke softly, careful not to draw attention. "Sir," he said, "there's a royal guard who has made a polite request. He wishes to speak with you in private if possible." Barack blinked, surprised. Guards were known for discipline and silence. They did not break protocol. They did not ask for personal moments, especially not with visiting leaders. "Is everything all right?" Barack asked. The aide nodded. "Yes, sir." He didn't seem troubled. His request was respectful, unusual, but respectful. Barack paused. He thought of the guard's eyes, the quiet emotion behind them. Maybe this was connected. "Where is he now?" Barack asked. "In the East Corridor, sir, waiting." Barack considered the schedule in his mind. Meetings were planned every hour, but he knew he had a short break before the next session. And something in his heart told him this moment mattered. "Tell him I'll see him," Barack said. The walk to the corridor was calm and unhurried. The palace seemed quieter in this part of the building. The tall windows let in soft light, painting gentle patterns on the floor. As Barack walked, his mind wondered, what could a guard want to say? Why would he risk making a request that went beyond his duty? When Barack reached the corridor, he saw the guard standing alone. He was still in full uniform, tall hat in place, hands at his sides. But now, without the line of other guards, he looked more human, less like an untouchable figure of ceremony. The guard's posture was still formal, but there was a faint tremor in his breathing, a small sign of nerves. Barack could sense it immediately. The guard took a slow breath. Then, in a voice soft but steady, he said, "Sir, thank you for allowing me a moment." Barack nodded gently. "Of course. What's on your mind?" For a second, the guard closed his eyes as though gathering courage. Barack waited, not rushing him, giving him space to speak when ready. When the guard finally began to talk, his voice held sincerity that reached deeper than the words themselves. That was the moment when Barack understood. Whatever the guard carried in his heart, it was something meaningful, something that reached far beyond the walls of the palace, beyond the uniform, beyond the ceremony. And though Barack did not yet know what the guard was about to share, he felt a quiet pull inside him, almost like fate guiding both of them to this single, unexpected moment. It was the kind of moment that did not happen often, but when it did, it stayed with a person forever. The guard stood in the quiet corridor, looking both nervous and determined at the same time. Barack could see the mix of emotions on his face, even though the guard tried his best to hide them. Years of training had taught him to stay calm, but in this moment, his true feelings showed through. His hands stayed by his sides, just like the rules said, but his fingers pressed together tightly, as if he was holding on to courage. Barack gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Take your time," he said gently. "You don't need to rush." The guard nodded gratefully. He looked down for a second, breathing slowly, then looked back up. His eyes were clearer now, as if he had gathered the strength he needed. "Sir," he began softly, "I know guards are expected to stay silent and follow the rules, and I respect these rules deeply. I have never broken them before. But today, I felt something inside me telling me I had to speak with you. I hope you can understand." Barack nodded again. "You're not doing anything wrong by speaking honestly? I'm here. You can share whatever you wish." The guard released a small breath, almost like a sigh of relief. "Thank you, sir." There was a moment of silence. Not uncomfortable, just still. The kind of silence where two people stand in a peaceful place, preparing for something important. Then, with a steady but emotional voice, the guard began to tell his story. "I grew up in Birmingham," he said. "My family didn't have much money, but my parents always tried to give me a good life. My mother worked long hours at a shop, and my father drove buses for the city. They were kind people, simple, hard-working, and full of love." Barack listened with full attention. He could tell the guard wasn't just sharing memories. He was opening a part of his life that he rarely spoke about. "My childhood was not always easy," the guard continued. There were times when I felt like I didn't fit anywhere. Some children at school looked at me differently. Sometimes they said things that made me feel small, even when I didn't want to feel that way. I didn't understand why I felt so unsure of myself, but I carried that feeling for a long time. He paused. His voice wasn't breaking, but it held a soft tremble. Barack remained silent, giving him the space he needed. I started watching the news when I was in my early teens. I didn't fully understand politics, but I understood hope. And the first time I saw you on television, sir, something in me changed. You spoke with calmness, like you knew who you were and what you believed in. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't speak harshly. You spoke like someone who believed that people could be better. Barack blinked, touched by the sincerity in the young man's tone. Words like this always humbled him. The guard continued. I was 13 when you first ran for president. I remember sitting in front of the television in my small living room with my parents. They watched quietly. I watched with wide eyes. And for the first time in my life, sir, I felt proud of something I didn't even understand fully. He paused again and looked down, almost as if embarrassed by how open he was being. Barack gently said, Please continue. I'm listening. The guard raised his eyes and nodded softly. At school, things didn't suddenly get easier. Children didn't change overnight. But I changed a little. I started walking with my head a bit higher. I started believing that even someone like me could have a place in the world. I felt less alone. The corridor was completely silent, and the soft sunlight from the windows made the moment feel even more real, like the whole palace had stopped to listen. When you won, sir, the guard said, I remember the day clearly. My parents hugged each other. I didn't fully understand why I felt so emotional, but I did. I went to school the next morning, and even though some children still didn't treat me kindly, I didn't feel small anymore. Something inside me said, if he can do it, maybe I can do something with my life too. Barack felt a warmth in his chest. He had heard stories of people feeling inspired, but each story was unique, each one personal. This one felt especially heartfelt. The guard took another slow breath. Years later, when I turned 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't good at many things. I wasn't the smartest or the strongest. But I was disciplined. I respected rules. I wanted to serve in some way. So I decided to join the Royal Guard. A faint smile touched his lips, as if remembering the day he first put on the uniform. It wasn't easy, he said. Training required a lot of effort. My body was tired many days, and my mind was tired even more. But I didn't give up. I kept reminding myself, if I don't believe in myself, how can I expect others to believe in me? And I remembered watching you speak about courage, not the loud kind of courage, but the quiet kind. Barack listened with gentle admiration. He could see how much the young man valued this moment. And so, the guard said, his voice steadying, I worked hard. I passed all my tests. I stood here today because I believed I could. And when I saw you again during the ceremony, he hesitated, choosing the right words. Sir, it felt like everything had come full circle. Like the boy who once felt invisible was now standing in front of the person who helped him feel seen. Barack felt something stir inside him, deep and sincere. He had met many people who admired him, but rarely had anyone spoken with such quiet truth. The guard continued, I know I am just one guard among many. I know my story may not matter much in the grand scheme of things, but I have carried these feelings for years, feelings of gratitude, feelings of respect. And today, for the first time, I felt like I had the chance to tell you. He lowered his gaze respectfully. Sir, thank you, not for speeches or politics or history, but for giving a boy hope when he didn't know who he could become. Barack took a deep breath, letting the words settle into him. No applause, No cameras, no stage, just a heartfelt moment from one human being to another. He stepped a little closer to the guard, not breaking rules, but showing warmth. "Your story matters," he said quietly, "more than you realize." The guard's eyes softened. His shoulders relaxed for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. "And you," Barack continued, "are not just one guard among many. You're someone who found strength in yourself. I'm honored to know that I played even a small part in that." The guard's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something brighter, something peaceful. There was no rush to end the moment. The palace remained quiet, the corridor still. Time seemed to stretch gently around them, as if respecting the importance of the exchange. Then the guard spoke again, but this time in a whisper. "I never thought I would be able to say these words to you. Thank you for hearing me." Barack offered a warm smile. "Thank you for sharing them." In that calm corridor of Buckingham Palace, two lives touched for a brief but powerful moment. One offering gratitude, the other receiving it with grace. Neither of them knew it then, but this simple conversation would become a memory both would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The corridor remained quiet after the guard finished speaking. For a long moment, neither Barack nor the guard moved. It was as if the air itself had grown still, holding the weight of the story that had just been shared. Barack felt the sincerity of the young man's words settling deep inside him, touching a place that speeches and applause could never reach. Moments like this were rare, unexpected, gentle, and unforgettable. Barack took a small breath and stepped closer, not breaking any formal rule, but allowing the distance between them to feel more human. He could sense that the guard had more to say, even though he seemed unsure if he should continue. Years of discipline had taught him to stay silent unless spoken to, and now he struggled with the habit of holding things inside. "You spoke very courageously," Barack said softly. "But if there is more on your mind, you can tell me. You don't need to hold anything back." The guard hesitated. His eyes shifted slightly, reflecting the sunlight coming through the tall palace windows. He looked like someone standing at the edge of a deep place inside his heart, deciding whether he had enough strength to step forward. Finally, he spoke. "There is one more thing, sir," he said quietly. "Something I have never told anyone, not even my family." Barack nodded gently. "You're safe to share it." The guard swallowed slowly, steadying his voice. "When I was younger, before I found confidence, I often felt lost. I kept asking myself who I was supposed to be. Some days I felt proud of myself. Other days I felt confused. And on many days, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere." He paused, pressing his lips together lightly as he searched for the right words. "Even though my parents loved me deeply, I didn't always understand where I fit in the world. I was part of a community, but sometimes I felt separate from it. I looked for someone I could look up to, someone who showed me that it was possible to find strength while being gentle, to speak calmly, yet still be heard." Barack understood that feeling more than the guard could know. It reminded him of his own younger years, navigating identity, searching for belonging, trying to understand where he fit in the world. The guard continued, "When I watched you speak, sir, something changed inside me. You talked about kindness, unity, dignity, and believing in yourself, even when the world feels complicated. I didn't always understand your policies or the full meaning behind your speeches, but I understood your tone. You helped me believe that finding your place takes time and that it's okay to discover yourself step by step." His voice trembled softly, not from fear, but from honesty. "There were days I felt unsure, days when I worried I wouldn't become the person I hoped to be. But then I would think about your journey, how you stayed true to yourself even in difficult times, and that helped me more than you could ever know." Barack felt a wave of emotion rise inside him. He hadn't expected such sincerity, especially not here, in a quiet corridor far from the world's attention. He looked at the guard and saw not a uniform, not a symbol of ceremony, but a young man who had carried a heavy story alone for many years. The guard took another breath. "Sir, the reason I asked to speak with you today is because, for the first time in my life, I wanted to thank the person who helped me find myself. Not with grand actions, but with simple words that reached a young boy who needed them." Barack felt his chest tighten with a gentle ache. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper. Something like gratitude mixed with humility. The guard lowered his voice even more. "I didn't think I would have the chance today. Guards don't usually meet the people they admire. But when you walked past me and looked my way, I felt something I can't explain. It was as if the boy I used to be whispered, 'This is your chance. Don't stay silent this time.' So I listened." He looked down, as if afraid he had said too much. But Barack didn't see it that way. "You did the right thing," Barack said in a warm, steady voice. "There is courage in speaking from the heart, and I'm grateful you trusted me enough to share your story." The guard looked up slowly, and there was a tiny shine in his eyes, soft, emotional, sincere. But this was only the beginning of part 3. There was something else building inside him, something deeper, something heavier that he had carried for years. "Sir," he whispered, "there was a moment in my life when I almost gave up on myself." Barack's expression softened even more. He didn't ask what happened. He simply nodded, letting the guard know he could continue without judgment. The guard drew in a shaky breath. "It was when I was about 16. I was struggling a lot back then, struggling to understand myself, struggling to find my voice, struggling to believe I had a future. Nothing bad happened physically and no one harmed me. But my heart felt tired. My mind felt crowded. And I felt small, even though I tried to hide it." His words were gentle but heavy, like they had been sitting inside him for years, waiting for release. "One night," the guard continued, "I was sitting alone in my room. I felt like I couldn't figure out who I was supposed to be. I didn't tell anyone what I was feeling because I didn't want to trouble my parents. They worked so hard and I didn't want to add to their worries." He paused, then added softly, "But that night, I turned on the television, and it showed you speaking at an event. You spoke about finding strength even when we feel unsure. You said courage doesn't mean we have no fear. It means we push forward even when we feel uncertain." Barack remembered saying something similar long ago. Hearing it repeated from someone else's lips surprised him in a deep way. The guard continued, "I held on to those words, sir. They stayed with me. I didn't become confident overnight, but your message made me take small steps, steps that eventually brought me out of that difficult time." Barack felt his throat tighten. The idea that his words, spoken so far away, had helped a young boy in Birmingham find strength. It was overwhelming in the gentlest way. "Sir," the guard said softly, "I don't know where I would be today if I hadn't heard those words. They helped me stay hopeful. They helped me keep going." For a moment, the guard closed his eyes, taking another deep breath. When he opened them, Barack could see how meaningful this moment was for him. "I wanted to tell you this for years," he said, "but I didn't think I ever would. Now, I'm glad I found the courage." Barack stepped closer again, his voice low and full of sincerity. "I am honored that you shared this with me. Truly honored. Your story is powerful, and the strength you found came from within you, not from me. I simply reminded you of what was already there." The guard's face softened, touched by the kindness in Barack's words. A long, quiet moment passed between them. A moment where nothing else mattered. Not the palace, not the ceremony, not the titles. Just two people sharing a profound truth. And then something happened that would stay in Barack's heart forever. For the first time in their conversation, the guard's voice broke slightly, not in sadness, but in relief. "Sir," he whispered, "thank you for giving me a reason to believe in myself again." Those words were simple, but they carried the weight of years. Barack felt a deep pull inside him, an emotional stir he did not expect. The guard's honesty, his vulnerability, his gratitude, it touched a place inside Barack that speeches and honors could never touch. That was the moment everything shifted. A quiet moment. A private corridor. Two lives connecting in a way neither planned, but both needed. It was the calm before the emotional wave that Part 4 would bring. Barack stood in the quiet corridor, feeling the young guard's words echo gently inside his heart. He had listened to many people during his life, world leaders, students, workers, families, and strangers with stories full of hope or struggle. But there was something different about this moment, something pure, something deeply human. The guard had spoken with honesty, not because he wanted attention, but because he had carried a quiet story inside him for years. And now, standing in front of Barack, that story had finally found a voice. Barack could feel a warmth rising in his chest, a soft emotion that slowly filled him. He took a step closer, not out of formality, but out of empathy. "You have no idea," Barack said gently, "how much your words mean to me." The guard looked surprised, as if he never expected that someone like Barack, someone he had admired from afar, would be moved by his story. He lifted his head slightly, unsure how to respond. Barack continued, "People often think leaders get strength from speeches, crowds, or ceremonies. But the truth is, moments like this give me more strength than anything else." The guard's eyes widened a little, touched by the sincerity in Barack's voice. "It reminds me," Barack said softly, "that the work I tried to do mattered to someone, that the words I spoke reached a heart somewhere far away. Hearing your story, it makes everything feel real in a way awards never could." The guard's throat tightened with emotion. He tried to hide it, but his eyes shimmered ever so slightly. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply stood in silence, sharing a feeling that didn't need to be named. Then the guard quietly said, "Sir, I never thought someone like you would take the time to listen to someone like me." Barack shook his head gently. "Never say that. Every person matters. Every voice matters. And your story, it has touched me more deeply than you know." The guard's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. He took a soft breath, trying to keep his emotions steady. Barack looked at him with warmth. He saw beyond the uniform. He saw a young man who had fought silent battles, who had grown through uncertainty, who had shaped himself through courage he never realized he had. "You showed strength long before you ever met me," Barack said, "and I want you to recognize that. Your journey, your honesty, your courage, it's everything." The guard lowered his eyes, overwhelmed but grateful. But then something unexpected happened. The emotion inside Barack rose so strongly, so suddenly, that he felt his breath catch for a moment. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pain. It was the humbling weight of someone's truth. The way the guard spoke, with quiet honesty and deep respect, touched him in a way he couldn't easily describe. And before he could stop himself, Barack felt moisture rising in his eyes. He blinked gently, trying to steady himself. But the emotion had already reached too deeply. The guard looked up, and when he saw the softness in Barack's expression, his own eyes widened. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked softly, almost whispering. Barack gave a small, shaky smile. "Yes, I'm all right. It's just I've never heard anything quite like what you shared." The guard stood frozen, unsure how to react. He had never imagined he would see the man he admired become emotional because of his words. Barack continued, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "Your story, it's powerful. It reminds me why kindness matters, why words matter, and why we must never forget that our actions can reach people we'll never meet." He paused, his voice growing softer. "You reminded me today that hope travels farther than we think." The guard felt something inside him shift, like a weight he had carried for years finally lifting. He had come to thank Barack, but now it felt like Barack was thanking him instead. Barack took a slow breath, trying to steady the emotion inside him. "I want you to know something," he said gently. "You didn't just admire me from afar. You helped me today. You gave me a gift, a reminder of why I've always believed in people." The guard's eyes softened completely. No uniform, no posture, no rules could hide the emotion in his expression now. Barack spoke again, his voice warm and full of sincere appreciation. "You said I helped you believe in yourself. But today, you helped me remember something too. That even when the world feels divided or complicated, human stories still have the power to bring us together." The guard swallowed slowly, moved beyond words. Barack stepped even closer, breaking the usual formal distance. He raised a hand gently, not touching, but a gesture of connection. "You didn't come to me with anger or demands. You came with honesty, with gratitude, with your heart open, and that is something rare." The guard felt his breath tremble softly as he listened. Barack continued, speaking slowly, like each word carried meaning. "You said you once felt invisible, but today you stood in front of me, brave and open. I see you, not as a guard, not as a uniform, but as a person, strong, kind, and full of value." The guard's eyes glistened, a soft shine spreading across them. He looked away for a second to steady himself, then returned his gaze to Barack. "Sir," he whispered, "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Barack replied. "Your presence, your story, your strength, they've spoken for you." Another quiet moment passed. The guard's breathing softened. The tension in his shoulders faded. He stood not as a soldier, but as the young man he truly was, someone who had found his voice, perhaps for the first time in his life. Barack watched him with gentle admiration. He knew this moment would stay with him forever. Then, in a calm voice filled with gratitude, Barack said, "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey." The guard felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, relief, joy, all wrapped together. He had come here hoping to simply say thank you, but instead, he had found acceptance, understanding, and encouragement. He took a careful breath and whispered, "Hearing that from you means more to me than you can ever know." Barack nodded warmly. "And hearing your words means more to me than you can imagine." The corridor around them remained still, holding the weight of the moment, gently, respectfully. Outside, the palace continued with its usual rhythm, but here, just here, time seemed to slow. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't a public moment. It wasn't history written in newspapers. It was something deeper, two hearts meeting in honesty. Barack took one more steady breath, feeling a calm settle inside him. He said softly, "I will remember this moment for the rest of my life." The guard felt his own breath hitch slightly. No medal, no rank, no recognition could have meant more than hearing those words. And then came the moment that would stay with both of them forever. Barack leaned forward and gently placed a hand on the guard's shoulder, a gesture not of formality but of sincere human connection. "Thank you," Barack whispered again. The guard closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed with gratitude, before opening them again with renewed courage. 2 lives, 2 journeys, meeting in one unforgettable moment. A moment that would shape what came next. The quiet moment between Barack and the guard slowly began to settle, like soft ripples on a still lake. The warmth of their exchange lingered in the air, gentle and steady. For a long time, they didn't move or speak. They just stood there, 2 people connected by honesty and understanding. The palace, with all its history and gold-framed walls, felt almost small compared to the human truth shared in that corridor. Finally, Barack took a slow breath and stepped back, giving the guard room to return to himself. He could see the mixture of relief and peace in the young man's eyes, as if he had finally let go of something he had been holding on to for years. The guard straightened his uniform gently, but his posture no longer looked stiff. It looked natural now, relaxed in a way he probably hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm proud of you," Barack said softly. He didn't say it as a leader. He said it like one human speaking to another, genuine, warm, and full of sincerity. The guard blinked, touched in a way he couldn't fully express. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "I will remember your words for the rest of my life." Barack smiled at him. "And I will remember yours." They exchanged one final look, filled with mutual respect, before the guard stepped back into the more formal distance expected of him. But even though he stood straighter again, there was a new lightness in his expression, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Soon, an aide appeared at the far end of the corridor, signaling that the next portion of the official event needed to continue. Barack nodded, and the guard gently tapped his heel in a respectful gesture. The moment had ended, but its meaning had only begun. Barack walked down the corridor, feeling changed in a small but powerful way. His steps felt slower, more thoughtful, as if each one carried the weight of the guard's story. When he rejoined the official gathering, people greeted him with polite smiles and formal words, but he carried a quiet glow within him that no one else could see. During the remainder of the ceremony, he found his thoughts drifting back to the young guard. He wondered how many other people carried silent stories like his. How many felt unseen, uncertain, or unsure of their place in the world. How many needed someone to listen. He realized again that leadership was never about standing above people. It was about connecting with them, even in the smallest ways. After the event, when Barack was escorted out of the palace toward his car, he passed by the line of guards once more. And there, toward the end of the row, stood the same young guard, back in position, standing tall and proud in his uniform. His face remained calm as protocol required, but his eyes held a peaceful warmth. Barack gave him the slightest nod, small enough that no one else would notice, yet meaningful enough that the guard would understand, and the guard understood. He held still, but inside, his heart felt full. When Barack's car drove out of the palace gates, the guard watched it disappear into the streets of London, knowing his life had quietly changed in a way most people would never know about. Not because of fame, not because of recognition, but because of a single moment of human connection that had helped him rewrite how he saw himself. But the story didn't end that day. In the months that followed, the guard found himself moving through life differently. He carried the memory of the conversation with him, not as something heavy, but as something uplifting. When difficult days came, he remembered Barack's words about strength, courage, and purpose. And slowly, he began to discover new parts of himself he hadn't explored before. He became more confident in sharing his thoughts with others, especially with new guards who joined the training program. He found himself giving gentle encouragement, reminding them that everyone has their own journey and their own pace. He noticed that some of them looked up to him the way he once looked up to Barack. And one day, something unexpected happened. A young recruit, nervous and unsure, asked him quietly, "How do you stay so calm and confident? You always seem like you know who you are." The guard smiled gently. "I didn't always know," he said, "but I learned that everyone has a place in the world. Sometimes it takes time to find it, and that's all right." The recruit nodded, comforted by his words. And for the first time, the guard realized he was now offering to others the same encouragement he had once needed himself. Not long after, he decided to volunteer as a mentor for youth programs in his community. Every week he met young people who were searching for their identity, just as he once had. Some felt lost, some felt uncertain, and some simply needed someone to say, "I believe in you." He listened to them, shared gentle advice, and reminded them that they weren't alone. And when they asked what had helped him become so steady and confident, he always smiled softly and said, "Someone once reminded me that strength comes in many forms, and that kindness has power." He never exaggerated the moment. He never used it to impress anyone. He simply let the lesson of that day shape how he guided others. Meanwhile, far across the ocean, Barack continued his life with his own responsibilities and commitments. But every now and then, when he was traveling or giving a talk, he would remember the guard's story. How one young man's quiet courage had touched his heart more deeply than he expected. He carried that memory with him as a gentle reminder that real impact wasn't always in grand achievements. Sometimes it lived quietly inside the people we inspire without even knowing it. Years later, during a public conversation about leadership, Barack spoke about an encounter, without mentioning the guard's name or the location. He simply said, "Some of the most powerful moments of my life came not from big events, but from honest conversations that reminded me what truly matters: kindness, understanding, and the courage to speak from the heart." And although the world didn't know the story behind those words, one person did. The guard, now older, wiser, and still serving in his own quiet way, heard the message during a live broadcast. He recognized the meaning instantly, even though it was spoken in general terms. He smiled softly, knowing that their private moment had stayed alive in Barack's memory just as it had in his. It wasn't a moment written in history books. It wasn't captured in photographs. It wasn't spoken about in public, but it lived in two hearts. The guard learned that believing in yourself can start with one moment of encouragement, and Barack was reminded that even the simplest words can change someone's life. And so the story continued, not in the palace, not in a ceremony, but in the quiet ways both of them carried the memory forward. A story of gratitude, a story of courage, a story of two lives connecting in a rare and meaningful moment. And though the world never knew the details, the impact remained. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones told only in the hearts of the people who lived them.